They said I was just an intern, a quiet girl in plain clothes who took notes and didn't ask too many questions. But that was before the missing deposit, before the camera footage was accidentally erased, before they smiled to my face and forged my name behind closed doors. They thought I wouldn't fight back, that I wouldn't dare speak. After all, who would believe me? A nobody in a borrowed uniform. What they didn't know was that this wasn't just any restaurant, and I wasn't just any intern. My name is Olivia Martinez, and the people who tried to ruin me, they were standing in a building with my family's name etched on every wall. It started on a Tuesday. I remember the smell of roasted garlic in the air and the soft clatter of silverware being polished in the back room. I had arrived early, just like I had every day for the past 4 weeks, in my plain black shoes and slate gray apron. The others called me Liv. They didn't know my full name. I didn't offer it. That morning, I stood by the hostess stand, organizing reservation cards while the shift manager, Troy, gave out assignments. He didn't look at me when he said, "You're on prep support again. Back line. Keep it clean and out of the way." No good morning, no smile, just orders. It didn't bother me, at least not yet. I'd asked for this, after all. 3 months earlier, I had finished my master's degree in finance and hospitality leadership at the London School of Economics. Most of my classmates were polishing resumes for consulting jobs or accepting cushy roles in family firms. But I didn't want the easy path. Not when I'd spent my childhood watching my father, Antonio Martinez, build this empire from a single corner bistro in Chicago to the most celebrated restaurant group in America. He'd offered me a leadership track position, an office with my name on the door, stock options, all of it. I turned it down. "Let me learn from the bottom," I told him. "Let me see what it's really like." He didn't argue. He just nodded and said, "Fine, but don't expect it to be comfortable." He was right. By the second week, I'd figured out who held the real power in the restaurant. Not the executive chefs, not even the floor managers, but the people who whispered during service and laughed just a little too hard when others made mistakes. They had their own hierarchy, and newcomers like me were kept at the bottom until deemed worthy. I didn't mind being underestimated. What I did mind was what I started to see. A young black couple was given the table near the kitchen door, even though better spots were clearly open. An older woman with an accent waited 15 minutes for water while the hostess scrolled through her phone. One evening, a delivery driver asked to use the restroom and was told curtly, "Staff only," while a man in a Rolex got escorted to the private lounge without question. I began writing things down in a small notebook I kept in my apron pocket. Not to report anyone, not yet, just to track patterns, just to be sure I wasn't imagining it. But in a place like this, noticing too much was dangerous. One afternoon after lunch rush, I saw a server intentionally short pour a cocktail for a guest she didn't like. I quietly pulled her aside and asked if it was an error. She stared at me coldly and said, "Don't act like you're management." Later that day, someone left a sticky note in my locker. Just 3 words. "Know your place." I folded the note in half and put it in my back pocket. Didn't show it to anyone. I still didn't tell my father. This was my choice, after all. My test. And at that point, I still thought I could pass it, quietly, cleanly, and without anyone knowing who I really was. I had no idea what was coming. They started calling me the clipboard girl. At first, it was said with amusement, half jokes tossed around when I scribbled notes in my small pad or asked too many questions about table rotation. But over time, the tone shifted. The smiles became tighter, the laughter more forced. My presence began to make people uneasy. Maybe it was because I didn't join in when someone mocked a customer's accent, or because I didn't laugh when the kitchen staff made bets on who would send their steak back. Maybe it was because I looked, really looked. There was a night, I remember it because it was raining, and the glass at the front steamed with warmth, when a woman in a Navy uniform came in, hair damp, asking for a to-go menu. Her shoes squeaked on the tile as she waited by the hostess stand. No one greeted her. The hostess, Veronica, was too busy adjusting silver bracelets on her wrist, glancing now and then at the woman's soggy coat with visible distaste. After 10 minutes, I walked over with a menu. "Sorry for the wait," I said, handing it to her with a smile. She blinked, surprised. You're the first person to talk to me since I walked in. I didn't say anything, just nodded. As she left, she turned back and said something I didn't forget. Don't lose that. That thing in your eyes that sees what others ignore. The next day, Veronica made a passing comment loud enough for half the front of house to hear. Some of us actually know how to manage a luxury brand. We don't run a soup kitchen. Laughter followed. I said nothing. But I wrote that down too. Over the next few weeks, I saw more. A white businessman who mispronounced our sommelier's name was still treated like royalty. A Latina guest who spoke softly was repeatedly asked to speak up by a waiter rolling his eyes. A pair of gay men were seated by the restroom, though their reservation clearly requested the terrace. At first, I brought these up quietly, to Troy, to Veronica, even to a line supervisor named Greg. They always smiled and said the same thing. We'll look into it. Thanks for flagging it. Noted. Nothing changed. Then came the lunch with the councilwoman. She arrived with 2 aides and a small entourage. Nothing flashy, just a quiet presence. She was black, probably in her early 60s, with a commanding stillness about her. She requested a table with low lighting and privacy. Veronica assigned her a table near the open kitchen, bustling, noisy, far from what she asked. When I gently suggested we could offer a booth in the side alcove instead, Veronica pulled me aside, jaw tight. She's not that kind of VIP, she said. Trust me. That was the first time I raised my voice. Respect isn't reserved for a certain kind of VIP, I said. It's the floor standard. We locked eyes. Hers were sharp, cold, and behind them, something else. Calculation. That afternoon, I was reassigned from guest operations to back-of-house logistics. No explanation, no email. Just a printed schedule with my name moved off the rotation. In the break room, I found my locker ajar. My notebook was gone. When I asked around, no one saw anything. Someone shrugged and said, "Maybe you lost it." Another whispered, "This is what happens when you poke the hive." I didn't sleep well that night. I kept replaying the things I'd seen, the looks, the silences, the patterns. And for the first time since I'd started this internship, I wrote to my father, not to report anyone, not to complain, just a single line. When the standard becomes silence, is it wrong to speak? He didn't write back, not right away. But 3 days later, I saw his initials in a guest reservation, AM, party of 1, slotted quietly at 7:30 p.m. No notes, no fanfare. That night would change everything. But I didn't know that yet. The thing about betrayal is, it doesn't start loud. It starts in whispers, in sudden silences when you enter a room, in coworkers who once smiled now avoiding your eyes. It starts in subtle shifts, like you're standing on a rug that's slowly being pulled. By the 3rd week, that rug was nearly gone. It began with a favor. Greg, the line supervisor, pulled me aside before Friday's double shift. "We're short on hands. Think you can take the deposit envelope down to accounting after lunch service?" he asked. It wasn't a casual request. Usually only full-time leads handled deposits. There was a strict chain of custody, signature logs, ID checks. But he handed me the sealed envelope without hesitation, already tagged, initials scribbled on top. Inside was $9,400 in cash tips and prepaid bookings. "You want me to log it?" I asked. He shook his head. "Already done. Just walk it down and get the receipt." The man at the accounting window had curly hair, a sharp jawline, and a name tag I didn't fully catch. He counted each bill, gave me a nod, and handed back a stamped receipt. "Thanks, Olivia," he said. "You're good." I placed the receipt in the pouch of my apron, careful as ever. But on Monday morning, that receipt was gone. Troy met me at the employee entrance with arms folded. "There's a problem with Friday's deposit," he said. The envelope had been flagged in audit, $4,500 missing. No backup logs, no footage of me entering the accounting wing. "Just a glitch," they said. "Just a coincidence that the camera feed cut out during my delivery." They asked if I had the receipt. I reached for my apron. Empty. I checked my locker. Nothing. It was gone. Within hours, I was sitting in a windowless room across from 2 corporate auditors. "Miss Marin, you were last in possession of the deposit envelope," one of them said. "Yes, and I handed it over to accounting," I answered. To whom? I don't know his name. Young guy, curly hair, silver chain. They exchanged glances. We have no such employee on the accounting team. That evening, I was placed on administrative pause. No badge, no schedule, no access. Just the dull, familiar ache of being erased, neatly, quietly, like I was never part of the system at all. When I returned to clear my locker, there was a note waiting for me. No name, no handwriting I recognized. Just 3 words scrawled across a folded napkin. Too curious, careful. I held it in my hand for a long time. Not because it hurt, but because deep down I realized this was never just about me. They didn't want me gone because I was new. They wanted me gone because I noticed things. Because I asked why the black couple got the worst table. Why the elderly Asian woman waited 15 minutes for water. Why important meant white, loud, and well-dressed. I'd seen too much, and now they needed to make me disappear before I asked anyone else to see it too. But what they didn't know was that I wasn't the only one watching. Beth, the soft-spoken hostess who always looked down, stopped me in the hallway. I copied something, she whispered, slipping a flash drive into my palm. I think you should see it before they delete it. That night, alone in my apartment, I watched the footage. There it was, Greg, handing the envelope to the same curly-haired man, time-stamped 1 hour before I ever touched it, and in that moment, everything changed. They hadn't just underestimated me. They'd forgotten whose name was printed on every wine glass, every menu, every marble tile in that building. When I watched the footage Beth saved, I didn't feel anger. I felt clarity. Greg passing the envelope to the fake accountant at 4:38 p.m., an hour before he gave it to me. No panic, no accident, just a clean, quiet betrayal. Beth had sent the file to me and also to someone else, Ms. Lang, regional officer, who was already scheduled to audit our branch that week. She moved her visit up to Monday, without warning anyone. At 11:03 a.m., I walked through the front doors, not in uniform, but in a dark blazer and low heels. I wasn't trying to hide anymore. The restaurant hummed like usual, forks clinking, servers prepping tables, polished professionalism everywhere. But beneath it, I could feel it, the tension of a place about to crack. Inside the private dining room, Ms. Lang set up a laptop and connected it to the projector. No press, no board members, just the people who needed to see the truth. Troy, Veronica, Greg, and a handful of staff members, including Beth, standing quietly near the back. My father arrived moments later, calm, unreadable, hands clasped behind his back. He didn't sit. He stood beside me. The video played. At 4:38 p.m., Greg handed the envelope to the man who didn't exist in payroll records. Veronica was visible behind them, watching, not stopping it. At 5:40 p.m., Greg gave the envelope to me, smiling, saying nothing. Silence fell. Greg was the first to speak. That could be anything. That video doesn't prove it was the same envelope. Ms. Lang cut in. We traced the serial numbers. The marked bills match. Try again. Veronica crossed her arms. So what? She's not even a real employee. She's just some intern who got too nosy. I turned to face her, voice steady. I asked why some customers were treated worse than others. I asked why no one seemed to care when a black couple was sat near the bathroom. Or when a woman who barely spoke English waited 20 minutes for water. Greg scoffed. Maybe because we don't have time to babysit every special case. He stopped too late. A ripple moved through the room. Servers exchanged glances. Even Troy winced. Ms. Lang's voice dropped like a blade. Did you just call paying guests special cases? Greg looked around for support. There was none. Then my father stepped forward. You didn't know who she was. That's clear. But here's what matters more. You didn't care who anyone was unless they looked and tipped a certain way. He looked directly at Veronica. You watched someone get framed. You didn't just let it happen. You smiled. Veronica snapped. She walked in here acting like she was better than the rest of us. No, I said quietly. I walked in here acting like every guest deserved the same. Veronica's mask slipped, or her voice rose, shrill. People like you don't understand the pressure we're under, The types who show up late, pay in cash, ask too many questions. Those aren't the customers who keep this place afloat. There it was, clear, unfiltered, no saving it now. My father didn't speak for a long moment, then simply, Troy, Greg, Veronica, you are all hereby terminated, effective immediately. Troy opened his mouth. Sir, this isn't fair. You're right, my father replied. It's not, it's just overdue. As they were escorted out, heads turned in the restaurant. No one clapped, no one spoke. But something changed in the air. The silence felt lighter. Beth turned to me and whispered, they really thought they could bury you. I shook my head. They weren't just trying to bury me. I looked at the host stand, at the tables, at the uniformed servers who had been told to smile, not speak, at the guests who had accepted lesser treatment, quietly for far too long. They were trying to bury everyone who didn't fit their idea of who belongs here. And now? Now they were gone. Their own words had done what my evidence never could, and the rebuilding could begin. The day after the firings, the restaurant opened at the usual time. Same tables, same lighting, same jazz drifting from the overhead speakers. But everything felt different. There was no official announcement, no grand reveal, just a quiet shift. Veronica was gone. Greg's name no longer appeared on the duty roster. Troy's voice no longer echoed through the hallway. Their absence spoke louder than any press release. I reported for work, not as an intern, but as the interim director of guest experience integrity, a title that, on paper, sounded formal, corporate even. But to me, it meant something simple. My job was to make sure no one felt invisible. Ever again. Beth became lead hostess. She didn't ask for it. She didn't expect it. But she had earned it the moment she chose truth over convenience. We began meeting with every department, servers, kitchen staff, janitorial crew, not to lecture, but to listen. Some cried, some vented, some just nodded quietly, relieved someone was finally asking. 2 weeks later, I stood by the host stand as a woman walked in. Mid-50s, modest blouse, quiet eyes. She glanced around nervously. I'm probably underdressed for this place, she said, half laughing. I smiled. There's no such thing. I gave her the window seat. She sat in the golden light of early evening, ordered a glass of wine, and stayed for 3 courses. As she left, she placed a folded napkin on her plate with a short message scribbled in pen. Thank you for seeing me. I kept that napkin. Some of the changes were small. We restructured the reservation system to eliminate hidden priority rules. We revised staff training to include bias awareness and customer dignity, not as a module, but as a mindset. We installed an anonymous feedback box for staff and made it a rule that every suggestion would be reviewed and acknowledged. No exceptions. Other changes were bigger. Bonuses were no longer tied only to profit, but to retention and guest satisfaction across all demographics. And a new sign went up in the entryway, right above the host podium. It read, "Everyone who walks through these doors deserves respect, no matter how they speak, look, or pay." My father visited again, this time as a guest, not a CEO. He sat quietly, alone at a small table in the corner. After dessert, he waved me over and said simply, "You turned this place around faster than I ever did." I smiled. "You gave me the space to try." He paused, then added, "I never wanted this to be your battle." "It wasn't," I replied. "It was everyone's. I just happened to be the one who couldn't unsee it." In the end, this wasn't a story about revenge. It wasn't even a story about exposure. It was a story about what we choose to do when the easy thing is to walk away, and we stay instead. About one intern, one moment of truth, and the quiet decision to build something better in the ruins of what was broken. Not louder, not flashier, just better. And this time, for everyone. Sometimes the most powerful changes begin with quiet observation, when someone chooses to see what others ignore and refuses to look away. This story isn't just about a workplace mistake. It's not simply a CEO undercover story or a twist in hierarchy. It's about the courage to speak up, the cost of silence, and the dignity every human being deserves. In this narrated story, we follow a young woman who entered the restaurant as an intern, but carried the heart of a leader. What she faced wasn't just bias, it was a culture of dismissal, covered up by routine. Yet she stayed. She noticed. She remembered. And when the moment came, she stood, not with vengeance, but with integrity. If this emotional story touched something in you, we ask, what would you do if you were in her place? Would you speak up, even when it's uncomfortable? Would you stand for someone being erased? Share this powerful storytelling moment with someone who still believes that fairness and respect matter in today's world. Whether you've faced workplace discrimination, seen corporate injustice, or simply felt invisible in the wrong room, you are not alone. Unraveled Fates exists to bring stories like this to light. Because justice isn't just about what we punish, it's about what we protect. If this daughter of CEO story reminded you of what matters most, leave a comment. Share your own experience. Help us carry these values forward, one voice, one story at a time.